participating right now, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain. Ron, I know you're focused on your own election coming up, the midterm elections that are going to determine where this country goes over the next couple of years. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you your reaction to the chaos going on in Great Britain right now.
Well, you know, Joe, the president will have a statement out this morning. All I want to say in front of that is that our country's always had a special relationship with the United Kingdom without regard to the partisan affiliation of our president or the politics of their prime minister. That's going to continue no matter who the UK picks as their next prime minister. We're going to maintain that special interest, special relationship. There are so many things causes and concerns we share in common with the United Kingdom, particularly right now in terms of combating Russian aggression in Ukraine. We're going to work very, very closely with whomever succeeds Prime Minister Truss.
I want to ask you about the White House plans to lower fuel costs. But before I get to the decisions that you all have made that Republicans have been critical of, I want to ask about the Saudi decision to cut back production, a decision that even people close to the Saudis were shocked by and said made very little economic sense. What is America's reaction? What is President Biden's reaction to that after going over to Saudi Arabia on a trip that was politically fraught, but he did it because in part because he did want cooperation on energy issues and strategic issues. How does the Biden White House respond to the Saudis' inexplicable actions?
Well, as the president said, we're re-examining our relationship with Saudi Arabia, and I think there are members of both parties in Washington who want to see that happen. But I think it's also important to know the president went to Saudi Arabia for a number of reasons. One was to talk about, overall strategic cooperation. Look, the goal here right now is we are trying to rally a global coalition to combat Russian aggression in Ukraine. The president's had historic success with that, bringing Europe together in an unprecedented way, growing NATO in an unprecedented way to combat Russian aggression. We would like the Saudis to join us in that coalition and to help the world check this outrage in Ukraine. And we're going to continue to try to press the Saudis to do that. We need as many countries as we can have combined to prevent this outrage, this horror in Ukraine from going on. We know that Russian oil is the key to funding that war, and we're going to do whatever we can to try to prevent the Russians from using their oil profits and proceeds to fund that horrific event that's going on in Ukraine.
So, Ron, the president announced that we were going to be releasing 15 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Some Republicans have come out, been very critical, said that that should never be tapped into except in cases of war, and that the president was only doing this because an election was a couple of weeks away. What's your response to those criticisms?
Well, I say, first of all, we had Republicans saying, hey, he needs to do something about gas prices. And then we did something about gas prices. And they're like, well, don't do that. So it's hard for me to take the criticism very seriously. Look, we've had a policy this year of a historic release from the Petroleum Reserve, and it's worked to bring the price of gas down. Over the summer, it fell 98 days in a row, in part thanks to those releases. And by the way, not just us, the president worked to get other countries to do the same thing. India did a SPRO release, Japan, South Korea. We brought the world together as part of this effort, again, to deal with the consequences of the Russian war in Ukraine. We brought the price of gas down all summer long, almost $1.50. And then, around this action with Saudi Arabia, it started to go back up a bit. So the president, again, brought the same tools to the table. Part of that was the release from the reserve you mentioned, Joe. But also part of what he announced yesterday was setting a price to refill the reserve, which gives the U.S. oil industry incentives to continue to explore and to produce more. We're going to see record oil production in this country in 2023. We want to continue to responsibly increase that as we make the transition to clean energy in the long run. We think this country can have energy security and a clean energy future. That's the direction we're moving America in. And the president's announcement yesterday is both about the price of gas in the short run and a more stable energy supply in the long run.
Ron, good morning. You're looking at the same numbers that a lot of us are. You probably have some even more specific numbers about where voters are heading into these midterms in 2.5 weeks on the economy, with the economy and inflation being far and away the most salient issues to voters as they go to the polls. 8.2% inflation, rent, health care, buying a vehicle, all those things, buying a home got very expensive over the last year or so. It appears moves by the Fed to hike rates haven't had an impact yet. It appears some of the measures you all have taken haven't had an impact yet on those areas of rising prices. So what do you say to a voter who says, Democrats are in power, things are too expensive to me, I'm going the other way?
Well, first of all, again, I have to be careful. I'm covered by the Hatch Act. I'm not supposed to be saying things to voters to try to get them to go our way. But I will talk
about...
Say
it to me, then.
Yeah, I'll say it to you. Look. What I will say is, first of all, we have done things to bring prices down. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which breaks a 30-year hold that Big Pharma had on keeping the prices of drugs high. It's going to start to bring the prices of drugs down. We've already announced the Medicare premium will fall next year. First time in a decade that the premium's going down next year. You mentioned cars. Again, there's been actually a dramatic drop in the price of used cars in the past few weeks. We're starting to see that affect the market. We brought down the price of gasoline, and as I mentioned before, we've done more things yesterday to continue to bring the price down. Look, I get the fact that prices are high. That's pinching family budgets. I'd also say, if you look at where the economy was when we got here, we had 8% unemployment. We've brought that down to the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. We had people in lines waiting for a box of food. Poverty is down dramatically. We've had record low, all-time record low, Hispanic unemployment, and all-time record low in black teenage unemployment. So we are putting Americans back to work. Businesses are open that were closed 2 years ago. Schools are open that were closed 2 years ago. We are trying to get over the gigantic economic impacts of COVID. We have higher inflation rates in Europe. Inflation is a global problem. But here in America, the president is fighting to bring down prices of everyday things like prescription drugs, like gasoline. And I think, I think that's our message to voters at this very tough time.
Hey, Ron, we've heard from the president a number of times, including in front of NATO, that the United States, the White House, will support Ukraine as long as it takes during this war with Russia. But we heard from GOP leader McCarthy this week that may not be their policy, suggesting that there will not be a, quote, blank check if Republicans take control of the House after the midterm elections. So can you walk us through what things you guys are doing to convince Republicans there to stay the course, but also, in case they don't, and if they do win in November, about a lame duck bill that could go through between now and January?
First of all, Jonathan, I will say, again, without violating the Hatch Act here, we are planning to work with the Democratic House and the Democratic Senate next year. That's our plan. I will also say that to date, the fighting Russian aggression in Ukraine has had bipartisan support. And I want to specifically thank Senator Mitch McConnell for being one of our strongest supporters in tackling Russian aggression. This should not be a partisan issue. The Republican Party historically has stood for combating Russian aggression. And so I don't see why this should go the direction that Leader McCarthy suggested. I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene should set the foreign policy of the Republican Party. I think that'd be a mistake if that's the way this goes. We are going to work with people in both parties to continue to make sure that this country does what it has done since the end of World War II, which is stand for freedom in the world, stand to combat Russian aggression in the world, and help the people of Ukraine specifically fight off this invasion.
All right, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain, as always, thank you so much for being with us. We greatly appreciate it.